Welcome to a new episode of Mind Your Mind, the podcast dedicated to all frontline workers working around the world in different places, in different organizations. Today, I'm very happy because we will be talking about the well-being in higher education and other educational settings. I am with Sabrina Fitzsimons. She is co-director of CREATE, the Center of Collaborative Research across teacher education, and an assistant professor of education in the School of Policy and Practice at Institute of Education at Dublin City University. Welcome, Sabrina.
Good morning, Roxana, and thank you very much for the invitation to speak on your podcast.
You are very, very, very welcome. We are very happy to have you here. I know that you have been focusing on thinking and researching in the well-being of teachers. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about the work that you're doing with your colleagues at DCU CREATE?
So, as you said, Roxana, I am co-director of DCU CREATE. It's the Centre for Collaborative Research across teacher education. We have about 30 members from the 6 schools in the Institute of Education. And our primary work in the IOE is the preparation of student teachers for the teaching profession. So for early childhood, primary, secondary, and further education and training sectors. So we have a lot of expertise in the Institute of Education in the preparation of teachers. And in DCU CREATE, we have a number of research pillars that we are focusing on. And one of those pillars is educator occupational wellbeing. And with my colleagues, we are focusing on teacher occupational wellbeing, so primary and second level teachers in Ireland. And we've conducted the first phase of that study. And in the next phases, we're focusing on student teacher wellbeing, leaders well-being, HEI academics well-being, and a number of different roles, educator roles within the education system. And then in terms of my particular interest, my research is on teacher educator occupational well-being. So they are basically academics who are preparing student teachers for those various contexts. They have a variety of roles, so they are the traditional academics, so they engage with research, teaching and service, but also then they are preparing student teachers for placement, so that involves mentoring, support, travel to placement schools, supervision of students once they are out on placement, and then there is a lot of work with placement schools and cooperating teachers and cooperating tutors. So they work to full capacity, but as they're based in universities, they're also expected to be research active at the same time. So there's a lot of things to juggle and a lot of things to balance within the role. So so that is the area that I'm focused on.
Yes, and I'm thinking as well of the variety of skills they have to present to conduct their work. Is so much different levels, it's multi-layer, and it's so many different ways of connecting with the students, no? That not
Absolutely.
Only by teaching.
Absolutely. So a large part of the work is actually mentoring and supporting students. So just outside of the lecture theatre, outside of the classroom, then there's that element of the work. And then obviously, some students flourish and do very well on placement.
Yes.
Other students need extra support. So
Yes.
there is, I suppose, an element of emotional labour to the job as well.
Indeed, no doubt about that. Can you tell us about the study that you conducted? What motivated the study?
So I recently completed a master's in applied psychology at Robert Gordon University. So my research started from there, and I'm actually in the process of completing a PhD now in psychology back in Robert Gordon University.
Fantastic.
And so the research is focused around teacher educators who work in higher education contexts in Ireland and the United Kingdom. And in this research, I wanted to explore the prevalence of burnout in this cohort, and then the factors that were actually driving or contributing to this sense of burnout. So I conducted a mixed method study. So in total I had 154 participants. So they were teacher educators working on accredited programs of initial teacher education. Again, that would be early childhood, primary, post-primary, or further education and training sectors. And they were from across Northern Ireland, the Republic of Ireland, England, Scotland, and Wales. So in order to understand the story of burnout and understand what was happening, I shared a survey with the participants. I drew on the Copenhagen Burnout Inventory. So that's a valid and reliable instrument to use to measure emotional exhaustion. And then there were follow-up interviews with, I think in the end it was 15 teacher educators I interviewed. So within that process then I was able to layer, get an understanding of what was happening broadly, and then focus down a little bit more through the interviews to unpack the kind of the key themes that were coming through.
And I think at this point also it's very important to remind all the people that is listening that we will share with them the links to this study and other articles as well that you have written, so they can read the full study, outcomes of the full study. But we will be talking about it, and we want to sort of dive in and explore and discuss what are your findings. And so can you start to tell us a little bit about what is the situation regarding burnout for this group of professionals?
So it's complex, as they say.
Yes.
But I suppose what I found through first of all, through the Copenhagen Burnout Inventory, if we look at, so that, as I said, measures emotional exhaustion. So when we look at the definition of burnout, as you know, we have emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and that reduced sense of personal accomplishment. So the CBI focuses specifically on the element of emotional exhaustion, and I chose that particular inventory because other studies on burnout in higher education academics had identified that was a prominent area. So I wanted to kind of just to delve down a little deeper with that inventory, with this particular cohort. So it measures then personal related burnout, work related burnout, and student or client related burnout. So you can use this inventory in other sectors, for example, healthcare or prison sector, etc.
Yes.
So when the analysis and all of that was done, I suppose the headline figure is that 65% of this sample indicated they were experiencing moderate to high personal burnout and work-related burnout. And I suppose really, we might think, it's not, it can't be, it's not that bad. But they're moving out of that optimal range, that good range of positive stress that we need to, help us to engage with things, and moving then into something that's quite negative. So it is actually having an impact on their daily lives and on their work lives. And I suppose it might help, Roxana, if I explain maybe the symptoms that they spoke about.
Yes, because I'm also thinking about the distinction that you're making between personal burnout and work-related burnout. Probably that can also help people to understand this. I think this is a very important differentiation as well. I think is related somehow to this dichotomy body-mind, professional, personal, that it seems like everything is kind of separate, but actually we are a whole.
Yes, exactly.
and we is the same person, is us, in a professional setting or in a more personal setting, in the different roles that we have in life, no?
Yes, exactly.
And so I think it's important to bear in mind as well what's happening in our personal life, to think about burnout too.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. And it was interesting, like one of the key things really, I suppose, that came out for me from, and obviously with any research tool, you're also, I suppose, critiquing that tool and identifying being aware of the limitations of it. And I suppose one of the key things, and it stuck out for me, somebody had said, there is no distinguishing personal burnout from work-related burnout in this role, because I feel as though I'm always on. So the work and the home life is blurred. So that was quite interesting there. But when I looked at the figures then for personal and work-related burnout, they were very similar, very, very
I
similar.
see.
Yeah. So personal burnout, I suppose, if we're to separate that out, if it is indeed possible, then it relates to, if we're going by the strict definition, then it relates to things that are happening outside of the workplace. So it may be a family crisis, or maybe issues at home, or etc. And then the work-related burnout is directly related to what is happening at work. But the challenge is, where is the line then for that?
Yes.
Somebody feels like they're always on 24/7.
Absolutely. Definitely that line is much blurry in real life, right?
Exactly.
But obviously, for a research purpose as well, it's important to have these distinctions and these definitions.
Yeah. And the third element to that, Roxana, is the student-related burnout. So this, for me, this was really, really interesting. So we had our moderate to high, teacher educators were coming in at moderate to high for personal burnout and for work-related burnout. But when we looked at the student-related burnout, it was much, much lower. Much lower. It was in the mild category. So what we could see is that, yes, burnout is prevalent, particularly in those two areas, but it's not students that are driving the burnout.
I see what you mean. I see. That's
so something else was happening there.
Something else is happening, and because in the day-to-day working in services, supportive services for students, one of the issues was always to think about what the role of the teachers, of the tutors was in referring sometimes to students that probably didn't needed that much support, or if they were just having a moment of difficulty that didn't necessarily mean that they were in huge crisis and so on. But I think that the experience of a student in distress might be quite strong as well. No, might be quite distressing for the tutors themselves.
Yes, absolutely. And when we get to the themes, then that is actually one of the themes that comes true. But for the most part, students give teacher educators energy. They give them joy. Yes. To be able to see somebody doing well and going out into the teaching profession, and seeing them then when they're out there and being brilliant teachers, like that gives life, it gives energy. Elements of that interaction with students does lead to burnout, but for the most part, it's actually the joyous part of the work that people want to engage with.
Yeah. So it connects with the purpose of those that are doing this kind of roles. You wanted to tell me a little bit about the symptoms that you were discovering. Do you want to tell me about it? Because I think that will help as well our audience to start to think about, okay, how am I doing about this? No?
Yeah. So the participants spoke about symptoms that manifested in an interrelated way across physical, cognitive, and psychological domains, and we know we can't unpack one from the other. So that makes sense that there was an interaction between those elements. Yes. So in terms of physical symptoms, the really big one was disturbances to sleep. So one participant described it as intermittent insomnia. So, waking during the night, or early waking, or waking up with things running through your mind, like, oh, I need to finish that email, or I need to finish that journal article, or I need to do this. So this kind of sense of intermittent insomnia. And that insomnia then led to a sense of physical exhaustion. So, at the end of the day, not being able to do anything, just feeling like, oh, I need to collapse now at the end of the day or at the end of the week, and therefore not having energy for family or friends, or energy actually to go out and exercise or to catch up with people. So they were kind of the physical symptoms they talked about. Many people also actually spoke about back and neck pain as well. Now, whether that's directly related to burnout, we can't say, but because they're sitting at a desk most of the time, for a few hours during the day, particularly if they're doing research or they're writing up articles or completing student appraisals or assessment. So that was definitely there in the data, much more pronounced than I had expected.
Yeah, and also probably is the way that people is not these areas, the shoulders, the neck, the areas, the back, where we somehow store stress, and our muscles we have big muscles in our back, they start to get quite tight. That's interesting.
Yeah, so they spoke a lot about that. And then in terms of cognitive symptoms, they spoke about poor concentration, not being able to do tasks as quickly as they normally would. So where you could do something, fire off that email very quickly, taking more time to do it, one participant described it like wading through treacle, trying to do the normal things, but just taking so much longer and just being much more slower and not as sharp as they would normally be. And obviously in the role that we're in, that is really important in terms of research and, to feel awake and feel revived and energized and be able to engage with the research when you do get that little moment to do the research. So we can see how all these things kind of knock on to one another.
Absolutely.
They spoke about then psychological symptoms, so feeling overwhelmed. So that was a really big one, feeling overwhelmed, this sense of downward pressure. And some participants described it as relentless.
And there is where we can, think about the three elements as well, as you were saying, where one starts and the other finish. But when we are feeling quite overwhelmed and we are in that state of mind, it's difficult to be sharp and clear in your mind. Obviously, it's difficult to relax and be able to sleep well enough. So the recovery phase that we so much need it gets affected immediately, and that will affect as well the way that we feel, how resilient we can be about emotions as well, and how much we contain of that. And so it's all interconnected, no? And we know that our brain works in a completely different level when we are overwhelmed.
Absolutely, and that came out very strongly in this, and people also spoke about, that sense then of feeling stressed, feeling irritable, and feeling then anxious about everyday tasks. And obviously, if you have that sense that, oh gosh, I feel like it's harder to do everything, then that feeds into that sense of stress and being anxious then, say, for example, in meetings or, when you have to be sharp and have to be on the ball with things.
Yeah.
So there was a strong sense of being exhausted but never doing enough.
And that I think that is so poignant. We hear about this over and over again, no? That level of exhaustion and how people can actually deal with that level of exhaustion. Restoration and recovery can happen in so many ways. We have many other episodes here in Mind Your Mind talking a little bit more about those spaces, but it made me think what you're saying, how much this week I have been talking a lot in clinical supervision with my supervisees from different areas about resting, about taking breaks, about holidays now that we are entering the end of the academic year. And so it's something about starting to think about that in a way that may be more consistent, that allow us to maintain a level of resilience that again allow us to have a sort of a longer lasting sort of period of resilience, really. But it's tricky because we need to be conforming with certain rhythms that the academic year has as well, and how that can be also complicated. How, when, how often, how long for you can actually take a break.
Yeah, definitely. And I suppose the thing about working in initial teacher education, so our student teachers, so obviously we have the research service and teaching element, but that big element of supervision and mentoring of student teachers. So student teachers are out on placement, say from 9 a.m. to 2 or till 3. So then the support for those students takes place potentially at the end of what should be the end of our working day, 5 or 6 or 7 o'clock at night. And also then some of our teaching then might be at night or might be at weekends because, initial teacher education is there's a variety of routes into it, and program structures and that. So what might be the end of my day is the start of somebody's teaching hours, a teacher educator's teaching hours. But the interesting thing, Roxana, is that teacher educators were aware, in this study of the negative impact of these symptoms on themselves, but said they put their head down and they plow on and they keep going. Because in some cases it's to do with the stigma around talking about poor mental health in academia. And we know there's a perception that academics are all fat cats and, that stereotype. There's no sympathy out there for for academics who are complaining about burnout.
Yes. And do you think then, through your study, you saw some emerging themes coming up?
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So definitely that was there. And I suppose that reluctance to speak about it, to acknowledge it. And then I suppose, people had talked about the impact that it was having on family and friends. So they talked about losing their friend circle. They talked about this having the excess of work and that always on culture having an impact on their family in terms of maybe their relationship with their partner or with their children. So that was definitely there as well. But they said they plow on and keep going.
Like pretending it's not happening.
Yeah, pretending it's not happening. And it's interesting then, so other people had spoke about, well, agency. Well, where is your self-agency in this? So that's a really, really interesting question. And I suppose I would be thinking it might be very hard for somebody coming into academia to say in the first year or two, actually, this is too much.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and people on precarious contracts, so there may be a reluctance there to speak about these issues because of the situation in higher education today, particularly in the UK context.
Absolutely. There is a lot of pressure in the university sector at the moment, no? And that's such an important question. Where do we start? Because there is, of course, I want to talk as well about the emerging themes. I know there is more, so let's talk about that. Definitely, let's give it space to that. But in between brackets, with what the question that you're posing, no, in terms of where the responsibility, that sense of agency, no, I feel that this issue about burnout needs to be taken care of in a more collective view. We know that this is the result of a systemic problem, and that organizations have a huge responsibility in what it is the state of well-being. But at the same time, we want people to have a sense of agency as well, to start to decide what they want to do, how they want to do it within the limitations of working in organizations, of their contracts and etc. No? So how to balance these two elements that are very important, that are part of the same, that's always the big question. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about that emerging themes that you were exploring?
So I suppose, so what is turning up the heat for teacher educators? So I identified a number of themes, but I might focus on three. So the first was lack of control. So teacher education in Ireland and in the United Kingdom has undergone significant change in the last 10 years in terms of policy, in terms of programmatic structure and things like that, and all of that has.
And that's the systemic element of it.
Yes,
that we are talking about, right?
Exactly. So all of that has a trickle-down effect on everyone who works in initial teacher education. So from program chairs to placement coordinators to people who are supervising student teachers on placement, and also then module coordinators. So things need to be changed, and there's a kind of a sense of constant flux in some cases that people talked about. Another aspect of that is the inspection process in initial teacher education. So if I just give you the example, in the English context, they have the Ofsted inspection process. So they inspect and basically regulate programs of initial teacher education. And, you know, those inspection processes, many teacher educators that I spoke to said they contributed to a real sense of being deprofessionalized, being ignored, a sense of surveillance, unnecessary surveillance. And in some cases, those inspection processes were described as hostile. For example, one participant said there's a real sense that they're looking for areas we are deficient in, and that's not pleasant. So there is all of this preparatory work on top of everything teacher educators already do. There is all of this preparatory work for accreditation processes or inspection processes, which seems to be in a way kind of added on to the work of the teacher educator. And in terms of the Ofsted context, you know, they will get their notice period before the inspection process, and then it's all systems go for that period of time during the inspection. And the outcome of that inspection can have significant consequences for a program of initial teacher education. So a negative outcome can result in funding being withdrawn or programs being closed, etc. So there was a real sense that that much of this demanding and significant work is in some ways invisible within research-driven university sectors. So that is leading to a sense of burnout. So there's really, I suppose, a corrosive potential to it, you know.
Do you think that this, we could say, because you're making me think about something that Dr. Paquita de Zulueta talks about, which is the approach to these inspections, the approach to error. She talks about it when she's thinking about humanizing health sector, but also with what you're saying, I'm thinking, well, is there here an element of the approach that is more negative, more blaming?
Yes.
More than focus on learning, progressing, evolving, and learning from mistakes as well, and so on, that allow the whole system to be in a mindset that is more for growth and collaboration instead of blaming and sanctioning, no?
Exactly. And because of, say, in the English context, there were some suicides related to the Ofsted inspection process. And in the last year then they are reviewing the inspection process both at school level, but also now for institutes or for initial teacher education programs. So it is being reviewed, and there is consultation going on to see how they can improve it and what they can do to address the stress that comes with the inspection process, and also then how to support teachers and teacher educators during the inspection process as well.
Yes, because this sense of lack of control is very, very negative. Really, obviously, it doesn't allow you to have that sense of agency that we were thinking about, no? And how much the system then goes in certain direction, and you just have to fit in that expectations and those norms with no much possibilities to do anything about it.
Absolutely. And that second theme then is related to it. So they are all interconnected, and it's work overload. So so that's very familiar in terms of the research on burnout. So a respondent spoke about never truly having rest periods or time for recuperation. Yes. So that was the big one, not having that time for recuperation. So they highlighted working nights, working weekends, working then during their annual leave. So because obviously teacher educators are expected to, in research-driven universities, they're expected to research and to publish. Sometimes the only time they get for that is during annual leave, and they should actually be taking time to recuperate. Yes. So it's feeding in that way as well. So So that sense of always being on, of always being tethered to the workplace, which
Yes.
increased post-COVID, so
Uh-huh.
the boundaries again between home life and personal life become blurred.
Yes.
And a lot of people spoke then about a real sense of guilt around this. So not
Yes.
being able to switch off, being the parent in the kitchen or in the living room on the computer saying, I will be with you in a minute. I'll be with you in a minute. And a minute turns into 3 hours and it's time for bed then for everybody. So,
Yes.
so there's a real definite sense of guilt around that, around not being able to switch off. And I think that's where then the structures um, in universities and other settings need to kind of to step in and to help to set
The
those boundaries as
boundaries,
well.
yes, so
Yeah, yeah,
important, those
yeah,
boundaries,
yeah.
because it becomes boundarless, and because people want to do a good job, want to
Yes,
achieve the expectations, want to,
yes,
but it's not, it's possible sometimes the time, and we were thinking about all the different kind of tasks that they
yes,
have on hand, no, and how
yes,
much time really is to do all of that is
yes,
the
exactly.
great question that touch upon
Yes,
boundaries.
yeah.
Also, for me, this feeling of guilt is
Mm.
something that I hear about a lot,
Okay.
because it's not only guilt in relation to what's possible and what's not in terms of their personal life, but also with their own team members, with people that they need to be working with
Mm.
because if
Mm.
sometimes one take annual leave may affect someone else,
Mm.
therefore it's difficult to even think about taking a respite.
Exactly, exactly. And particularly in the field of initial teacher education, there really is a team atmosphere, that might not be as present maybe in other academic fields, but in initial teacher education, there definitely is a team approach. So again, people spoke about obviously the positive things that that brings, but also
Yes.
then, that you don't want to let people down. And if a person needs to take leave or needs to take time to recuperate, then, they're aware that that work falls to somebody else within the
Exactly.
team. So it
Yes.
can perpetuate, and there was research out there on the contagion effect of burnout in the workplace, and
Uh-huh.
obviously that would be one of the contributing factors to it, along with say toxic workplace culture. But if people aren't being replaced and that work is falling back on someone else in the team, then you can see how it could potentially have that contagion effect.
Yes,
Yeah.
and then also that idea that you are allowed to take time off
Mm.
when you need it.
Yeah.
But actually, why not to take time off?
Yes.
Because I want it, because I have something special to do, because I just want to do nothing,
Yeah.
or I want to rest, or I just want to have the time for myself. I don't know,
Yeah.
to do my nails, to go for a massage, to
Yeah.
to deal with
Yeah.
that back pain, uh,
Exactly.
walk in the park, anything. Is it seems like somehow the within this context, no
Mm.
workload, overload,
Mm.
um, to have a time off becomes such a privilege,
Mm.
and we walk sort of we separate each other. We walk away from this idea that actually that time that is
Mm.
actually normally allocated within your contract to take becomes something that as many people just use when they need it, when
Mm.
it's something happening. I need to do something, therefore I need to take the time off.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That definitely came true in this research as well.
Mm,
Definitely. And the other key
yeah.
theme really was around post-pandemic issues.
Uh-huh.
Again, contributing to burnout. So, for example, in higher education, rules and regulations rightly had to flex during the pandemic. So, in terms of assessment, in terms of attendance, and things like that. So, they had to flex, and that was really important to support student teachers during that period. But it has had longer term consequences for initial teacher education, and particularly in relation to student attendance, student engagement, and then student demands on teacher educators. So, for example, where student teacher programs of initial teacher education are professional programs, so they need to be there they need to be present to participate fully. And to have the knowledge they need when they go out on placement, etc. So when the attendance, for some teacher educators, they highlighted the attendance was poor, or the students then needed supplementary materials, or they needed extra support, etc. So all of those things then have an impact on the workload of teacher educators, because the students need the extra support, and that is what we do and what we willingly do and want to do.
Yes.
So that was there as well. Post-COVID as well, we're also seeing more students presenting with mental health challenges.
Yes. Yes.
So that really was a big one. And because of their role, teacher educators are a major support network for student teachers. So again, there was a sense really in the data that yes, we want to be here and we want to support, but a lot of that support then will be taking place outside of what we might say there is no normal working hours for teacher educators, but say late in the evening, or maybe just to phone somebody at the weekend and have a chat through whatever the issue is, or to help direct them to the right resources and supports within a university setting. And again, all of that feeds into the work overload, but also there is an emotional labour aspect to it. And one participant said it's like they pour out all their trauma onto us, but we have no place to. We point them in the right direction and advise, but we've no place to process that labour, to process those emotions. So we're just left to sit with it.
Yes, and maybe with the concern if the student is being supported by other services within the university, then there is a confidentiality element that they cannot really fully access and understand the support that those students may be getting having, and so that collaborative work becomes a little bit complicated sometimes.
It does, yes. And one participant had said to me, if we look to psychotherapy or the psychological services, where psychologists have supervision, they have that space. That space isn't necessarily there in initial teacher education for teacher educators, unless you have a very good team around you, but then who supports that team? Exactly.
It's like what it is, the quality and the possibilities of containing the containers, basically, and I always talk, and I have said it here more than once, that I think that counselors and psychotherapists, we do work in an environment that is privileged somehow, because we are actually, it's part of our professional requirements to have clinical supervision, but there are so many others that are providing that emotional support that don't have the reflective spaces. So there is always that call for more reflective spaces for different roles. Shall we talk about those protective factors that you identified? I think that will be a good way to...
Absolutely. So I recently published a paper on the protective factors with David Smith and Lee Bogue from Robert Gordon University. And so one of the questions in the research was around protective factors. So what are the things that keep you afloat, that help you keep going and remain resilient in higher education? And we identified a number of themes, and then when we had explored those themes, we noticed that they fitted or aligned very well with the PERMA model of flourishing and of well-being. So in terms of that first element of that PERMA model, the positive emotions, so teacher educators said that they intentionally maintain their well-being by engaging in self-directed protective factors. So these factors included participating in mindfulness activities or resilience training or yoga or the daily activities that give them a sense of joy and contentment, like gardening or going for a long walk out in the countryside or out by the sea, or cultivating resilience through journaling and having that space to reflect on what is happening for them in the workplace or personal lives. So giving them a space, I suppose, to process a negative emotions, and again that space to recuperate as well. So and Manny said then as well that what they try to do is focus on the positive and ignore the metrics. So obviously a lot of what we do is metricized in university settings, so it's trying to kind of step outside of that and realize that yes, it's a job, it's a very important job, but it is just a job and I'm more than the metrics. So that was the positive emotional aspect of it. So the practices they were engaging with were intentional, and they were also personalized as well. So things to help give them that sense of perspective as they worked through particular challenges. In terms of that second then element of PERMA, they spoke about engagement. So this is evident for teacher educators through teaching and through service and through research. And really, I suppose, when we look at what engagement means in that context of PERMA, it's the loss of self-consciousness during an absorbing activity. And as I listened back to your podcast, Roxana, I was really interested in Josh Dixon's podcast, Flow to Prevent Burnout. And it really aligned with what we found here in terms of engagement. So the teacher educators talked about this sense of flow or engagement that comes through being immersed in shaping and supporting pre-service teachers. So either through teaching or to supporting them then when they're out on placement, and that opportunity to work with many brilliant young people who are going to make, a